James and Whistler.
Well, there were two things that we did that I think I'm clearest about the contribution they made, and neither of them really cost very much at all, either in time or actual finance. The first thing I'd say is that we made it mandatory, but through the leadership team that we formed with our major suppliers. We made it mandatory that at the start of every working shift, the guys and girls on that shift had an activity briefing, a daily activity briefing from their supervisor or manager. It needed only to be a few minutes. It would be an opportunity to talk about the work that they would be doing that day, the equipment they'd be using, the materials that they were expected to use, and an opportunity to remind them of the health and safety risks and the precautions. But it was also about production, about quality, about what they do with the waste arising. Now, after we'd been working on the village for about a year, 18 months, and that was Europe's largest housing project at that point, I was doing one of the safety tours and I met up with a gang of guys who were doing some glazing. And I spoke to the supervisor and introduced myself, and he introduced himself, and asked him what it was like doing these daily briefings, because presumably he'd done one that morning. And he said, when I came here, I couldn't believe that I was expected to do that. I was appointed as supervisor for this gang because I've been with the company for a long time and knew the job, and the previous supervisor had retired. And here I was expected to stand up and make a speech every morning, and I thought it was ridiculous. After we'd been doing it for 3 months, our managing director, came and visited because he wanted to know why we were the most productive team in this relatively small company. And I talked to him about the stuff that we did, and most of it was, yeah, we do that every week. And the daily activity briefing was something that they'd never done before, never heard of. But the result of it was that the guys at the beginning of each working period were clear about what was expected of them, worked more productively. If they were aware individually that a piece of equipment wasn't functioning properly or some materials hadn't been delivered and it was going to slow them down that afternoon, they could alert the supervisor to that, and those problems could be resolved quickly rather than waiting until someone stumbled across them later. So I would say that that's an example of doing something that's good for business, but creates a fantastic opportunity to engage with the workforce, talk about health and safety in a very practical way. And I don't think there's any job that's too big or too small for dealing with something like that. And linked with that, there's a whole piece of work that's been done, I mean, partly by the team at Loughborough, led by the questioner, Alistair Gibb, called Preconditioning for Success, that's been published on the Learning Legacy website, which highlights a whole load of things that you can do that makes it more likely that you'll be running a profitable job that's productive, that keeps the customer happy, that delivers safely and healthily. And you know, the second example is the use of our visual standards. We did something dead simple. We looked at areas where the housekeeping was poor and areas where it was good, and we took some photos. And we just said to all the supervisors and all the managers, look, here's a sheet, here's a picture with a big cross against it, which says this is what we don't want the workplace to look like. And here's one with a big tick. And what's more, we're going to give these pictures to the auditors when they come round and check. We're going to give this picture to your managers, and if they see that your site looks like the one with a tick, then that's breakfast vouchers, or maybe, you know, a ticket to go and see something you want to go to. Not 1,000 words, no problem about language barriers or anything, but it also empowered those supervisors to talk to their teams about the way that the workplace ought to look and the work activities. I think it fits in with what was being said earlier about simplifying those procedures. I think health and safety professionals have got a heck of a responsibility for making things much simpler, more straightforward and easier. We talk about worker engagement, but if you don't empower people to engage with you by making it look complex, it's like treating occupational health as something that can only be dealt with by men and women in white coats with stethoscopes. Whereas when you talk about protecting your hearing by wearing hearing defenders or moving away from the noise source, everyone can understand that. So I think making it simple, engaging with people, and in particular looking at those preconditioning lessons and just cherry picking the ones that work. I think any business, large or small, can learn the lessons. And it was paid for from public money, so you might just as well learn the lessons from London 2012.
Yes, we're going down a journey as a company, and the mantra behind it is doing the basics well. We're quite proud of a very good safety record within ourselves as an organisation. We're looking at where we can improve this. Picking up on what Lawrence has said, the visual standards. One of my favourite sayings, is plagiarism. If you take the idea from one source, if you take it from many sources, it's good research. We've done good research into visual standards, and we're adopting the same strategy around doing the basics well in our organisation. Some of the things that our leadership teams are talking about, quite right. So, what does good look like? We're a company, and the focus on this is London in 2012. We operate in over 60 countries around the world with the challenges that brings, and we're trying to implement safety management to one consistent standard worldwide. So, what's good look like? And if it looks good on London 2012 or on the Shard, we expect it to look that good in Hong Kong, in Chad, in North America. So taking the standards in a form that's readily transferable across all the areas that we operate in. And it's like I said in the introduction, using photographs and method statements and risk assessments. Lawrence's example of using photographs to show people what good looks like. And these are things, it doesn't depend on the size of the organisation, it's about leadership, it's about expectation setting. The key people in the organisation are transferring that down through themselves and through the supply chain. And probably the other thing I'd like to just briefly mention, again, it's a story about an SME that we worked with a couple of years ago on a fit out for the Royal Bank of Scotland. It was a painting and decorating contractor. They were having tremendous difficulties around housekeeping. At the end of the shift, leaving the site to a standard that wasn't acceptable to Mace, wasn't acceptable to a client, and wasn't acceptable to the management team. So in the engagement piece, the supervisor, the manager of that painting and decorating contractor with our support and coaching, got the guys and girls into the room and asked them, what do you think we need to do differently to effect a change in the way you're operating? They came up with a number of ideas. One of them was, if we do what you want us to do, let's knock off early on a Friday afternoon. Give us an immediate reward for doing the right things, the safe things, the right behaviours on site. Reluctantly, I guess, the project manager agreed to that. It was their suggestion. He was getting the buy-in from the workforce to keeping the site safe and tidy. So he acquiesced and let them knock off early on the afternoon. That transformed the safety attitude, the safety culture in the organisation on the project. And at the end of the project, that site manager for the P&D contractor, painting and decorating contractor, came back to us and said he'd saved a 5-figure sum in the wastage, because they weren't leaving half-empty paint tins unopened on the site, but taking it back down to the storeroom. He was able to replenish and then send it back out onto the job. So there's a real business benefit on that. But it's easy, back to basics, simple things that can be applied from major organisations down to the smallest organisations. Engagement, doing the basics well, what does good look like, and the leadership in setting those expectations.
I'll sum it up in 2 words. One is ambition and the other is people. Ambition for me was not setting out with a game saying, we'll have it steady state, we'll have it though it looks like Monday to Friday most days of the week. This is going to be right. That was the ambition. And that's something the company is now really getting to grips with, and any company can. We used to have a team. The team I work in my current role in the company is a safety and sustainable development team. It used to be known as safety and compliance. Compliance for me is a really negative word, because what it seeks to say is you're trying to get to a basic level. You're reaching up to what should be a minimum. And you ought to have, and any company can have, the ambition to do the right thing. And that's what the Network Rail has established with a vision. It's used by many companies, but everyone home safe every day. And a strategy that seeks to achieve that, where it's our agenda. It's not reacting to what a regulator tells us, it's not reacting to incidents, it's making sure it's our agenda and it's ambitious, it gets us to where we want to be. With people, we convey vast amounts of people around the country every day. We're not the immediate supplier, that's the train operators, but still these people, many of them come through our stations. And we also employ a huge number of people, 34,000 directly, another 100,000 through the contract train in the various works on the railway. And remembering that if we can engage all of those people who work for us to be focused on what we're wanting to achieve and the ambition we want in achieving that, then they're going to help come up with some of the solutions. They're going to get us into the right place. We've got to do some enabling work, we've got to do some trust building to establish the right culture that we're looking for, but they're going to have many other solutions. So just remember to focus on people.